everyone. Welcome once again to Bat Chat. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Steve Baxi.
Steve, we're in for a treat today, sir. Today we're doing a two-parter. We're going to be talking for twice as long as normal today because we're going to do both parts of Two-Face. And we've been looking forward to this so much that we've talked about it on every show for the last 3 shows. We're like, well, it's not Two-Face or anything. Can't wait for that to happen. This is certainly one of my very favorite episodes of the show. When I did my top 10 animated series episodes, I opted to just do single-part episodes because most of the two-parters were so good and had so much more time to flesh stuff out that I felt like it was unfair to put this on there. But I said, yeah, it'd obviously be on there if I were doing those. Yeah, this is probably in my top 3, top 5.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As far as two-parters go, the only one I like better is Robin's Reckoning, but it's still really, really good. This is the episode where they make a turn to the adult, and you're definitely going to start noticing it. Like next up, we've got Never Too Late, which is also a really, really dark episode. Then I've got Batman in My Basement, which is not, but then we've got Heart of Ice. So we're starting to get a more consistent quality. The Gray Ghost stuff is coming up very soon, so
Yep.
This is certainly, if you ever wanted to start animated series, this is probably where to go.
And this is probably where we'll start getting a little bit more enthusiastic, and have maybe a little bit more stuff to say. So anyway, if you like to watch the show with us, all you gotta do is pull out your DVDs, your Blu-ray, however you have it. You can go to Amazon Prime if you've got that, and get your episode rigged up to Two-Face Part 1. Get it past the menus and everything. Get it to timestamp 0. Get ready to press play whenever I say now. And the way we'll do this, Steve, is we will do the first part, and then we will, in the middle of the video, rig everything up, and I'll say now again so that everybody has time to do that. Okay. All right, Steve, are you ready, sir?
I'm all set.
All right, here we go, folks. Everybody, please press play right now.
This is the first episode. I was hoping that they would actually have the classic Batman animated series intro, and they don't. It's still super bad Batman.
You know, you could just stop being so lazy and get your discs out. That would do it.
I could, but that involves work and 3 extra steps.
Do you have, Steve, a favorite version of Two-Face, and is it this one?
I do, and I want to say it's this one. I don't like pointing to outside of comics for my favorite versions of characters very often, but they get Two-Face right so well. Like, this episode particularly, and then at the very end of the series with Judgment Day, those are some of the best Two-Face stories ever.
And importantly, there aren't a lot. So I mean, there's not a lot of contention there for great Two-Face stories. I mean, Two-Face in the comics, I tend to like when he is part of a bigger story and there's a lot of other villains there.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we reviewed one of the other best Two-Face stories before, Lonely Place of Dying.
That's right. And as soon as you said that, I was like, oh yeah, Lonely Place of Dying was really cool.
Yeah, Lonely Place of Dying. I think Robin Year One has Two-Face, and yeah, it does. So that's
really?
A really good story.
I haven't read that.
I love the card for this episode as well.
Mm-hmm. Importantly, Alan Burnett had a lot of the good scripts.
Yes, he did.
And I think this director was one of the big directors too.
Yeah, they use the same rotating roster. So a lot of them have the same familiar style. It's just every now and then they get something better to work with. The voice actor for Harvey is fantastic. I love him. He's every bit as good as Kevin Conroy. And
that's a great way to put it. He's got so much range, right? Because he's essentially playing 2 different characters, and then he has to play a character that is both of those characters grafted together.
Yes, yeah, he's great. This show also does dream sequences fairly well for some strange reason, and this one is great.
Yeah. I usually resist
2 particular ones in this episode, in this first part and the second part. But every time, just the camera angles, the voice work, the connotations of the coin flip and stuff is just fantastic.
I think it's really cool there that the Big Bad Harv personality has the twisted, weird eyes on both sides.
Yeah.
Later on, we'll get this little glimpse of Two-Face himself, where you have like a lightning strike and you see it in silhouette, but I think that's obviously a foreshadowing thing. We're getting to where we're about to do that. It's kind of a stylistic choice. But importantly, Big Bad Harv is not Two-Face. He is everybody's dark side.
Yeah, agreed.
But fully realized as this personality that he's accidentally conjured through the psychosis.
Yeah, and we'll get the details of that near the end of this episode where we figure out why Harvey is like this in the first place. And it's a little bit corny, but it works extremely well when you're trying to analyze just the basic idea of having a dark side, and even Batman being able to relate to that to some extent when we get his dream
Yeah.
sequence to open the second part.
There's some wonderful paralleling where we see Batman as another extreme personality, just like Harvey's, and how both of them became this because they felt bad about something that happened in their past, and they felt inadequate in some way.
Yeah, and they set it up wonderfully right here where
It's
Harvey's
not
there at the crime scene and Batman's there at the same time, and neither of them really legally have a reason to be there.
yeah.
It's just in their characters to be hands-on like that. This is very Dark Knight Returns in that way, especially when we get to Batman's dream sequence.
I want to talk real quick about this as an origin story because, first of all, it's unusual to do a villain origin in this show. Most of them are established already,
Right.
or at least they're done kind of quickly, or you open with the character fully established, but then we learn what their backstory was. I would argue that while this is a villain origin because he becomes a villain later, like we see him as a villain later, that's not the role he plays in this. This is a tragic story about a good man who falls apart and can't control his own psychology. And he's not the villain of this piece. The mob boss is.
Yeah, Rupert Thorne is.
Rupert Thorne,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Harvey plays the victim all the way through, and you get a lot of sympathy for what Batman's cause is. You get a lot of sympathy for his wife or fiance Grace, who's also from the comics, from Two-Face. Two-Face is there almost as a plot device to get us thinking about all these ideas, but at the same time they're able to realize his character so well. Like Harvey in this moment, like we have him about to attack the kid because he kicked mud on his suit. This is therapeutic in some ways, right? Like there are people that do this to you, and Harvey's just acting on the natural impulse everybody has.
Yeah, exactly. And
I
I think
also want to point out. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. You're fine.
I was just gonna say, they pay a lot of attention to the animation from the sweat on his face and stuff, and the red background and the alters and the colors, and that works really well.
One of the things that this episode does really well is it keeps us in his head through most of it.
Yeah.
And also a lot of that kind of surreal, like background change and stuff like that, that stylistic stuff, it doesn't take you out of the episode. It doesn't feel like just an arbitrary choice because it's all about us feeling the way he feels in a moment. And that's why it's not just the origin for a villain. He is the protagonist he's the dual protagonist for this piece, ironically enough. And I don't mean dual because he's two different people. I mean dual because Batman's the other one.
Right. Yeah, no, agreed. Rupert Thorne gets a lot of the best stuff to do as far as villainy goes in this episode. He's the guy extorting, and he's the guy that really caused Two-Face to exist in the first place.
Yeah.
So he never gets to pay for any of that, even by the end of this episode. And so it's ultimately not just tragic for Two-Face, but it's tragic for Batman because he
exactly.
fails at every turn in this two-parter.
Well, and they both in their childhoods have a similar problem in that they blame themselves in a way for things that weren't their fault and that they couldn't have helped.
Yeah.
And with later on we'll get the backstory that he put a kid in a hospital and thought that it was his fault that he died, and it turned out that his death was not related to that, or not death. I forget what exactly it is, but
he had some kind of just random flu virus, something like that.
Something happens to, yeah, exactly. And he goes his whole life suppressing his anger because he's afraid that that sort of thing might happen again. And the lesson here is about learning to feel and then controlling those emotions rather than allowing yourself to not feel at all, because it turns you into in Harvey's case, a kind of a non-human being, or at least it creates a personality that's kind of non-human. It separates out his two sides. It's just the dark side. It's not. It doesn't have the inhibitions that it ought to, and it kind of makes you question whether or not Batman has precisely the same problem.
Yeah, and a lot of that, which you're talking about the internal stuff, there's also a good bit of that that comes out externally. Like just a few minutes ago, we had that shot of the Statue of Justice and it's sweating. And right
Yeah.
after that, we have Harvey on stage and he's giving a speech. He's being this very public persona. And a lot of the reason that they think he's flipping so much now is because of the campaign he has to run.
Yep.
So there's a lot of just added societal pressures, and Harvey is trying to fix that through his work as the DA, the same way Batman's trying to fix it through his vigilante work. But ultimately, that's what cracks them more because they don't have a strong foundation internally, and the foundation they're trying to fix externally is just corrupting them more. And Batman's able to take it in a way Harvey isn't.
Did you just say flipping?
Yes.
Also, and the weird dichotomy there, the almost contradiction, is that they're both of them have suppressed certain emotions, and while that's the problem, it's also the thing that allows them to do what they do. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Agreed.
like Batman doesn't have a personal life. We talk about this all the time, and he like suppresses certain feelings and doesn't allow himself to have certain experiences so that he can be Batman. Well, I would argue that if it weren't for what happened to Harvey as a child and suppressing those emotions, he wouldn't have built the skills that he needs to be a politician.
Yeah, and I think importantly, the only social life either of these guys have is with each other. Um, like
Yeah,
Harvey's got
isn't that
Grace and
interesting?
Bruce has got Alfred, but those are just inevitable people that follow them. These are the only two
Great
guys
point.
that legitimately think of each other as friends capacity.
Because they have that in common, and you got to wonder how much of it how much of that they realize, or if it just like subconsciously brings them together.
Yeah. I want to point out because a lot of people talk about how this show is great for giving us a progression of Harvey Dent. I don't, especially watching it all again, I don't think that's necessarily true. We get one appearance of Harvey Dent and then we get Two Face, but
Hmm.
a lot of what they build into this two-parter still works as a progression. And later on, when we do, or whenever we talk about Beware the Batman, that show does precisely the same stuff with progressing Harvey into becoming Two Face, but they're not friends, and it's a very golden age version of that character. And
Oh,
it's
really? Okay.
interesting because they parallel Bruce and a best friendship with Deathstroke in that series. And they do
Oh,
precisely the same thing animated series does with like a double personality, a common friendship that makes
there's
them
that.
track and
There's
field.
that. There's that Two-Face face with the lightning.
Oh yeah, it's a great shot. Oh, and this is one of my favorite moments where Big Bad Harv comes out for the first time. And we get him flipping the coin, which by the way, that sound effect is great.
It's an entirely different vocal performance. I even like that he gets the scowl on his face. He looks like a totally different person. You almost wish that you could see just this scene in real life with a real actor. And I'm not saying anything against the doing this kind of thing in animation, that it's somehow less serious or whatever because it's not with a real person.
Right.
But I'm just saying that, like, to get to see a performance where, I guess what I'm arguing is that we're kind of seeing a performance, and I'm imagining that this is a real person I'm seeing. That's how good this is. That you get to see this like this normal level-headed guy turn into this monster, and it's not like he's a it's not like he's a Buffy vampire. It's not like he has a physical transformation.
Yeah, there's no suspension of disbelief necessary in this case. Like he just
Nope.
looks different, he sounds different, the tone
Mm-hmm.
changes, and you buy every second of it. This meltdown he has, it's not over dramatic, it's not cartoony. It feels like you're watching him on set, just tearing things up.
I'll argue that, and maybe it wasn't as much at the time. I don't know. I mean, I was a kid, so it didn't seem like it to me. I would argue that
Right.
maybe some of the language in the scene is a little. I don't know if corny is the right word, but you're just like the whole like goody good thing. I don't know, and then even just Big Bad Harv maybe would feel a little bit goofy now in a way it didn't at the time.
Yeah, because they can't say too much.
That's
The vocabulary
cartoony.
has to be limited to kids, so some of that just comes
Yeah,
naturally.
how do you do, well, I guess the question is, how do you do some of that stuff without expletives?
Yeah,
even
exactly.
even like PG or PG-13 expletives, it's a tough thing to get away with in a cartoon show right here. Real quick, Steve, I want to talk about 89 because this show, of course, was loosely based on that movie visually and with the soundtrack, obviously, and that kind of thing. And obviously, that's how they got it made. I always looked at this, and I think this is just how it happened, as an a cartoon version of a movie and then it went its own way, you know. And we've seen that with some things. The Mask had that, you know. We've seen that with some different things.
Right.
I would be very surprised if Harvey Dent wasn't made a black man in this because of Billy D. Williams, and I would also be surprised if they didn't decide to do an origin for him becoming Two-Face because we didn't get to see it in the movies yet.
Yeah,
You know, where it's
that's
like,
a good question.
where it's like, you know, we got to see Harvey Dent in the '89 movie, and I kind of think this is maybe a wish fulfillment thing, where it's like, let's just take exactly what they had there and move forward. We got so little with Billy D. Williams that there's no reason to assume that, there's no reason that he couldn't have had this exact psychosis.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it kind of makes you wish he got the Batman Forever role and he'd get to play Two-Face
I know.
there.
Although,
Like, yeah, great.
not me if they'd written him that way, because
No, yeah, not if they
there,
wrote him that way, but just as the
yeah.
idea of Billy D. Williams being Two-Face.
I mean, I'm not sure that even in the face he's not drawn a little bit like Billy D. Williams. You know, he's
Yeah, a
got
little bit. He
that
doesn't
kind of
have the
elongated
hair, but he's
face a
certainly
little
got
bit.
like the facial structure and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It
Um.
would have been really cool. Now, I love this vocal performance. How much of a coup would it have been if they'd had Billy D. Williams voice this? Now that
Oh yeah, that would be good.
that would have been
Yeah, and
super
not
cool.
to diss this voice actor though, because he is, like we've said,
No.
phenomenal.
Who is he? Have we looked him up?
I can look it up right now though, just because I'm curious as well.
I just like to know what else he's done, because that's the thing I've never looked up before.
Yeah, same here. I'm not usually one for voice actors and stuff, but this guy is really good. So, it's
They
Richard
do.
Mall.
Can you
Uh,
throw me some credits?
yeah, he's played Thomas Wayne in this very show before.
Oh, is that who that is? Okay, weird.
Yeah, he was trying to see if I can get his IMDb up. But he's
Oh,
mostly
good.
done stuff in animated series. It's just random other characters. Even in stuff like the Batman, strangely.
Good line there when Harvey says you don't know the half of it.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's very good. Oh okay, he's done more. He was in the Flintstones. He was in Jingle All the Way. Um, he was
So
in
he's had some
Brave the Bold
extra
as
stuff.
Two-Face.
Oh, weird. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. Just random other stuff. Scary Movie 2, Angel Blade. He's been on a lot. I guess he's just kind of a character actor.
When Bruce is staring down at the people that pick up Harvey and he's very suspicious, I can't help but wonder if he's more irritated about and suspicious about what's going on with them picking up Harvey, and whether it's not just the color of that car. That's a strange choice, that car.
I don't like his tracer gun. I think this is kind of a nitpick, but we've mentioned before that Batman and using guns just doesn't work, and the tracer is, come on, it's a pistol. It's almost exactly a pistol. It seems really counter.
I know you don't like that. It never really bothered me much when I was a kid, and I guess just like the more I review Batman stuff, it does make sense to complain about it.
Yeah, I mean it's a minor thing, but it just sticks out because they never do that, or usually
Well,
they don't do that.
if he has a psychosis about his parents being murdered and about guns in particular, and that's a progression that happens in the series, and I say progression in that I don't think at the beginning that he had that, but then you get to Batman Beyond, and obviously he had that. I can't help but think that a psychosis like that would make you not want to hold anything shaped like that.
Yeah. I mean that's
So
why
that's a
I
good
figured
point.
his grapnel was so different looking and not as like a specific gun.
Uh, there's a lot of really cool subtle stuff done visually in this. If you look at Harvey right here, the way he's animated, he's Big Bad Harv right now. You can tell if you were paying attention to that earlier scene. And
Yeah.
obviously Thorne doesn't know it, but pretty soon he's about to say, you're talking to the wrong Harvey, and they do a wonderful job of telling the audience that already.
Yeah, you're right about that. They do a lot also with his mannerisms and stuff, like just not the way his face is, but also just the way he stands and the way he's so impatient. Like
Oh well,
he's
but then right here. For a second there, it seems like he's not. Maybe he's slipping back and forth, or they're trying to make us guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I always figured it was kind of a blend thing, and that's why they need the coin, because Two-Face just makes the
Oh,
mix more defined.
yep.
And this
Because
woman, I
Wiki
just
is
keep wanting to
both.
call Carmen Sandiego because she looks just like that.
She does look like, and she looks like the Fox Carmen Sandiego too, because they had a cartoon series running at exactly the same time.
Oh, yes, they did. I didn't like that show very much.
Yeah, I didn't either. Oh,
Um,
and now he's Big Bad Harv. Okay.
yeah, this is great. This is
All right,
fantastic.
he was on his way to it then. I'm making
Uh,
stuff up.
no, this is great. I love Batman's about to come up and try to reach out to him. And he does that a lot, and it's really sad because you know he can't reveal who he is to him. But how much of a difference would that really make? Is Harvey and Bruce's relationship that strong, especially if that they're the only two people that they have friendship with? Um, I love all that. I love that there's very minimal action in this episode. Also, like this is the only action scene we get for the whole first part.
It's a good point. I mean, it is, and I mean, there's some more in the second part, but it's a very dialogue driven, but also very visually driven episode. We talk about the soundtrack a lot, but that helps it to be kind of creepy. By the way, I guess I gotta say this. So we have two homages right here to '60s Batman. This is a '60s Batman moment. You've got the girl who can't be in the middle of the fight because it's wrong to hit women, and so they're not gonna put her in the middle of that. But also right in the middle of, just as I'm saying, how '60s Batman is this? They go even farther and have her do the Preminger Two-Face thing and go wild. When they've got her doing a '60s Batman thing like that, right in the middle of that fight, you cannot tell me that word was not selected for that reason.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't notice that.
Wild.
This
And
moment always kind of haunted me as a kid.
yeah,
Just every time I watch this episode and Batman just looks at his face and he's terrified of it.
but we
This
don't get to see
reaction
it.
of no, like it's really kind of scary.
Oh, that's so sad. And I love the unrealistic thing that he's able to do with his eyes. Sometimes it plays a little bit for
Yeah.
comedy, maybe on accident. Here, I mean, just the expressiveness of his eyes growing like that and then shrinking down.
Yeah, that's why I'm always a fan of the big white eyes instead of having like pupils within the cowl because you can get more range of motion with that. But yeah,
It's
that's a
really
great
interesting.
moment. Everything from that ending blow explosion to Two-Face escaping the hospital just plays to some terrifying nightmare fuel.
Hmm.
Even burning this newspaper and stuff, they were really great about structuring their shots just right for this kind of stuff. They give it just the right amount of dramatic weight.
So I cannot watch this scene without thinking of the scene where the Joker is waking up from his plastic surgery in '89, and I'm
And
just
that's
waiting for
the
this guy to be
intention.
like, I'm just waiting for this guy to go, you see what I have to work with here? Mirror! Mirror!
Well, that was the intention. They wanted to base this entire Two-Face scene on '89 Joker.
Oh, is that okay? All right. Well, they managed it,
Yeah,
and it's cool to contrast them because, of course, the way that he responds to it is totally different. Different. Two Faces. I mean, like Harvey there, he's losing his mind. This is the place where the two personalities converge, and interestingly, just like with the Joker, that's the place where he has in one moment completely redefined himself. He is
yeah,
now who he is. So that's one of the iconic images from this show, right?
yeah. That still of the
When
lightning behind him
anybody
is
who's not watching this with us, the lightning behind him in the window with the first time you see that face. That was used in like a lot of the advertising and stuff. Like that kept coming back in places. And I think
yeah.
it's one of the most beautifully rendered things in the show.
Yeah, and I mean it helps that it's got so much weight behind it too. He almost looks like a Dick Tracy villain in some ways, but they do the story credit, do the character credit. They have Gray's fate right there, and it all just works.
Isn't it amazing how well that's paid off? I mean,
Yeah,
like most people watching this show have probably heard of Two Face. Like, they probably know what that character is. Although I'd say that he's probably a lot more well known after this show, given that he A hadn't been in a movie yet and B wasn't in the '60s show.
yeah,
But to do that kind of build up and then pay it off that well, I mean, like that design's got to work. It's got to be terrifying. You've got to buy that Batman was really felt horrible. That I mean, he would, but you know what I mean. Like
yeah.
you've got to buy that. Okay, you got to buy that she would faint, which You don't. But it's a comic book thing. It's a period thing, But
Yeah, and I mean, especially because it's a blue face, it doesn't look realistic, and they weren't trying to make it look realistic. All of
yeah.
the drama comes from the character stuff, not necessarily what you're watching.
Well, folks, we're going to go ahead and go straight on into part two. So go ahead and rig up
Yes.
your DVD or however you're watching it and get it to the second part now and be ready to press play when I say now. Are you ready, Steve?
I am all set. I'm excited.
All right, everybody, please press play right now.
Part two of Two-Face. Captions made possible by the U.S. Department of Education. I'm glad they support this show.
It is fun that the first two-parter of the show is Two-Face.
Yes, yes. I didn't think of that actually. I'm not sure if
I
it's
always
the
thought that
first
was great.
two-parter in the air dates though.
It's not, but it's the first one they made.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool. I don't know
yeah.
if they did that on purpose, but yeah.
I'm probably. I guess now that you say that, I'm pretty sure they probably did do it on purpose. It just seems too convenient and too good not to.
What, what do you think this episode would have been like if they had tried to truncate it into 22
It
minutes?
wouldn't have worked at all. I don't. I'm convinced that you can't do this version of Two-Face the way they wanted to without having it be two parts. They got a lot done with 22 minutes. Like Heart of Ice is really good, but Heart of Ice is also flawed in that you can't do anything beyond that without redefining the character. With this, they created a definitive Two-Face. They made a version that everyone can love and it works on all levels. And you can't get that kind of appreciation if you don't have room to grow.
It's a good point. I'm having a tough time figuring out who that voice is, Steve, that says previously at Batman. I think it's Alfred, but I'm not sure.
It sounds just like Alfred to me. I've looked up the credits just now and it doesn't list narrator. So I'm not
Well,
sure.
it wouldn't for that because I don't think it's the same voice every time when it says like the previously on Batman thing. Like a
Oh no,
lot
no,
of
I'm
shows
looking
do
for this
that where
specific episode.
oh okay.
So I'm not
I,
sure.
I'm just saying I would be very surprised if they had even made that a credit. Different writer for
Oh
the
yeah,
second part.
this is a different writer.
222.
Um,
We're
there
gonna
was
start seeing twos everywhere now. Importantly,
also we're gonna get another 60s Batman reference coming up pretty soon where Two-Face has a card made out to Two-Face and not Harvey Dent.
yeah, isn't that great?
Yeah, it's
That's pretty
fantastic.
great. This is one of those shows where, in kind of a fun way, it's hard to complain about things that are unrealistic. And I always say this: it's not about realism; it's about believability within the context of your universe. So
Yeah.
there are things like the visual things like with the eyes opening and closing, with the Batman mask thing that we talked about a minute ago, but also with things like Grace fainting. I can't, I don't know if I should. I don't know if I should complain about that. Now, I could see the argument that that's maybe somehow like too typical, uh, like like traditional female silent film thing or something. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
like girls can't handle difficult moments, so they see something they can't understand and they faint, whereas a man wouldn't do that. I'm just saying I can see somebody being offended by that,
I feel
but
like
as
that
far
I
as
think that criticism though would hold more water if we didn't get Barbara Gordon. Like they don't shoehorn or they don't make female characters do that very often.
yeah, and they're also not always super typical, and we do have some strong female characters. I think Grace is drawn okay.
Yeah.
She's not the most memorable or unique character in the world, but I feel for her, right? Like she is in the classic situation of the person who has a significant other who has this horrible mental condition. By the way, the score here sounds very 89.
Yeah.
This mental condition, this mental condition that all she wants to do is save him, but ultimately there's nothing she can do, and she's going to have to move on with her life. And isn't that really sad?
Yeah,
Um,
and we get more sympathy for her later down the line when she's still ready to accept Harvey as Two-Face.
That is the thing that most kills that moment in Fantastic Four with the Thing's wife when she immediately
Yes.
like hands over the ring and runs away because he's a giant rock monster now and she's so superficial she can't handle that. This is the kind of thing where when I can contrast it with someone who is reasonable, I can tell you why it's a problem. I will I will criticize this second part for um giving us this this section. It's supposed to be 6 months later, but I don't understand why so many things are happening now and didn't happen earlier. I
Yeah.
don't get why 6 months later Two-Face is just now thinking about going back to see Grace. There are a lot of places in this where it is too aware of the fact that this is the next part they're showing us, so they want to show us those things, but they also want some time to have passed. Those two things don't quite connect.
Yeah, this, if nothing else, could be maybe like a couple days later or a week later at most. But the 6 month gap thing, it doesn't work unless you had something in between where Two-Face was not mentally capable of making any decisions and it took him time to figure out the coin trick. But
Yep.
they don't tell us that. They don't act like that's the
Don't.
case. So yeah, that's
That's
definitely
it.
true.
What I love about this dream sequence, Steve, and I'm
Oh, and
always impressed with
that
this
was Rick
show.
Dent's voice doing Thomas just now.
That's okay. I'm always impressed with this show for making me like dream sequences because a lot of the time they're kind of a gimmick or a novelty and they don't really uh, they don't really reveal anything about characters. They're just kind of there to shock you. In this, we've got that dream sequence. It's the most surreal one we've seen so far, and for about half of it, I think I'm looking. I think it's Harvey's.
Yeah,
And I think
agreed.
you're supposed to think that, and then it turns out that it's Bruce's. And I think that the fact that we have two paralleling dream sequences, one in the first episode, one in the second episode, from these two different characters, helps us to parallel those characters and show how similar they are, and that they both have these huge regrets. And now Bruce is afraid that he didn't do enough to save Harvey, just like he was afraid he didn't do enough to save his parents. And how much of that psychology is just like Harvey's in his regret at doing something he thought was terrible with in his childhood. Well, now
Yeah, and he
they're
never
different,
diminishes
but
what Harvey's become either. Like he doesn't hold it against him. He doesn't call him a villain. That there's no point in any of these episodes where he treats Harvey like he treats everyone else.
good point.
And he has that great line at the end of the dream sequence that we talked over, where he says, "What are you dreaming right now? Peaceful dreams, nightmares, maybe both at once." And he's still trying desperately
Yeah.
to understand them.
One of the things that's most fascinating about Two-Face to me is that you've got a guy who is incapable at first of experiencing his good and his bad side at the same time. And then, ironically, what happens to him is that he grafts them both together, and he is them at the same time, but not in the way that you and I are.
Right.
He's not able to find that balance. He can't blend them and take the positive aspects of having a dark side, of having a temper. We need those things. As the therapist says in the first episode, it's about knowing when to act on them and when not to. And uh, what's really interesting about that line is that then he becomes Two-Face and he doesn't know when to act and when not to. Now he is both at the same time, and he's got to have the coin flip because he doesn't know how to integrate those. He's now completely indecisive. And it's because, and I kind of like his backstory, because when he was a kid, he made one choice, and it defined him. And and what he decided to do after that was to basically stop choosing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. A lot of times what you get with this kind of thing is that people pick sides regardless of whether they think about it. If it's not good, it's bad. If it's not free will, it's determinism. There's always an immediate need to put things on one side or the other. And Two-Face is that literally. What Batman, what Grace, and what everyone else is trying to tell him, or at least people reasoning with him, is that there is something gray. There is what Grace will say later, that it wasn't fate that made him district attorney. But
Huh?
he's incapable of seeing that. He's the personification of us versus them in that way. And he's
Yeah.
always acts like that, and he needs that coin particularly, which is a really fascinating take. It's not just any coin, it's not just any choice, it's the one that that coin gives him, and that tells you right there that there's a part of him that wants to pass judgment immediately. There's a part of him that wants to see the shades of gray, and we progress that later with Judgment Day, and we give him a third personality. That's that entirely.
Once again, the Batcave looks entirely different.
Yes, they still haven't hammered
That
down a
keeps
look for
happening.
this.
It's hilarious.
Um, and this is the different Alfred. This is the other voice actor. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but this is the other actor. And I guess they just
There's a
changed in between.
there's a subtle thing they do in the scene that I like a lot, which is Alfred doesn't understand Two-Face's psychology because he's not been close to him, and it's very complex and it's very personal, and you'd have to know the man. And and I like that. I don't think Alfred's played as dumb here like he's been played in some earlier episodes. Do you, Steve?
No, I
When
don't.
he's trying to guess at what his next move is going to be based on what his psychology seems to be, but he can only see it as, well, he's got this obsession with two and things being doubled and that kind of thing. And if this were 60s Batman, that's about all he would be. But here, it's much more complicated than that. And it being this personal for Batman is important for Batman psychology, but it's also really interesting and exciting because Batman's really the only person who has a chance at getting through to him, and then it's more tragic when he's not able to.
Yeah, and it's great that they don't play Alfred for last because I feel like that would get undercut really hard if they did that. When we get that scene with Alfred, it almost and I think maybe this is a criticism. I think you could almost entirely cut it. I feel
Oh,
like
okay, all
Bruce
right.
reasoning that out still would have worked. I'm not saying the scene's bad or anything. I agree with what you're saying about it. It's just a matter of like Alfred doesn't serve much of a purpose in that way, right? Like we're getting all of this dichotomy and Bruce understanding him without Alfred being there.
Uh, we haven't mentioned this yet, so I guess I'll just throw this out there. But I think it's important that Rupert Thorne is another bully
Yeah, yeah.
because
That's interesting.
that's what got Harvey Dent to that place in the first place, is that he was dealing with a bully when he was a kid, and again he thought he ruined him, so he had to suppress everything, and then it happens a second time, and then there's this physical thing that goes along with it, and
Yeah.
this it doesn't seem, this is a thing that doesn't seem unrealistic and not just believable for this context. This seems like a thing that could happen
Yeah, no, yeah, I agreed. The blackmail situation
psychologically.
is legitimately feasible, yeah.
Yeah, but I also mean psychologically. You know, like the way he creates the second personality, I buy that being a thing that can happen, and I also buy that if that, maybe it's convenient, but if that physical representation, if he becomes that personification of
Hmm.
the two sides, if that were to actually happen to a person that had that, I could see it. I mean, I could see that becoming their psychology, where now you're both personalities simultaneously, but you can't. But it's a skin graft, literally. You can't
Yeah.
put them back together. What would he be like if the surgery actually took and he was able to look like himself again? Would it be the same
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah,
You
that's a
know?
good point. The situations, the circumstances have to be just right for that to work, but importantly, they make sure that all of that's there in this episode and that
Yeah.
gives you that feeling. Like Batman to a certain extent, you have to wonder if Two-Face sees him as a bully too. Like he's too much of a bully on Harvey's side, and Thorne's too much of a bully on the Two-Face side. Um, and so he can't choose either, and it forces him into that I have to choose one way or the other. I need the coin flip thing. It's just more reinforcement of what he's doing instead of helping him.
It's just really interesting to have a character like this who is afraid of acting.
Yeah,
Afraid of conviction, afraid to make his own choices. And I'm always complaining about protagonists that aren't proactive enough. To do a story about a guy who's scared of being proactive and the damage that could do to you, and then people who are not proactive when they're forced to choose tend to be impulsive, tend to be reactionary.
Yeah, that's a good
And
call.
that's what he does, and that's what he ends up doing. Whenever he actually does a thing without a coin flip, and it doesn't happen very often, but when that does happen, it's usually like this really impulsive split second. He's all emotion now. He was afraid of emotion, now he's all emotion.
Yeah, and if we go back to part one for a second, the thing with his and Grace's wedding date, and he would not announce it. And it was part of their character that he wasn't able to make a choice.
Yeah,
The moment he said, "I'm going to put it in my campaign speech," it's officially there. Is right after that he becomes Two Face. Um, it's
it's
almost
great.
it's almost like fate in a way is telling him he needs to be this way, and he personifies that with the coin, like the world is against him.
Well, and again, that's a really dangerous thing about trying to figure out what the universe wants for you versus just picking a path and taking the consequences as they come if you make the wrong call. And I think the story is definitely is definitely saying that the latter is a much better way to live than the former.
Yeah, agreed. I was gonna say, and then Two Face with Harvey being district attorney, you got to wonder if some of that is him feeling he has to atone for that one choice he made. Like maybe his
It is.
entire career path is just on the basis of one accident.
Yeah, I think so. It's like he's always paying for it.
I love this, by the way, the half cloth over his face.
It's
Um,
kind of spooky. I like that it's kind of ghost like. It's almost like he is. I mean, I don't want to read too much into that, but I mean, there's a part of him that's dead, and
yeah, it's
that's
like an
ghost like.
executioner kind of mask.
Yeah, that's good too.
Yeah, it's really nice that he's trying to hide it from Grace and he's trying to deny who he is to her. And you get a lot of sympathy for her when you realize that she can take it off, or she takes it off his face, and she still loves him.
Yeah.
It makes her a little bit less two dimensional. It's a little bit cheesy, but it works because it shows that Harvey is in some ways doing this to himself. That it makes him comfortable, and he's not ready to accept anyone's help, even if they're ready to give it.
I also want to back off for a second and say, and maybe I should have said this earlier and say, how cool is it that all of this complex psychology stuff we're talking about was in a show meant for kids?
Yeah.
That when you're a kid and you're watching this, what does this do to you when you're a kid? Like very little of what your parents in the early 90s would probably let you watch would have this kind of level of sophistication and discuss these kinds of real issues.
Yeah, it's kind of astonishing. There's a generation that grew up on this version of Two-Face, and they didn't just get the character, they got a fascination for psychology. They got a fascination for
Yeah.
philosophy. It's that well written at times. And we'll get it again with Perchance to Dream, and we're talking about disassociation, and
Yeah.
legitimate psychological issues in that episode.
And yet, while you're when you're a kid and watching this, if you're not picking up on that stuff, I mean, I still think it's very likely to subconsciously, plant those ideas in your head and make you interested in that kind of stuff. But at the same time also, even though there's not a ton of action in this is not a boring episode. You can enjoy this on the level of the the tone and
Yeah.
the atmosphere and that kind of thing. There's a lot of provocative imagery, and that's enough when you're a kid. This stuff is beautiful. With the on the Bat Cycle and we keep talking about when they make excuses to make Batman black and white. That stuff looks really cool, and this is really great rain. Really cool choice the way they're animating that.
Yeah, it's consistently got a great atmosphere. This makes me think of that Dennis O'Neil quote. When he's doing a comic book documentary, I forget which one it is, but he's talking about like these books and these shows are meant for kids, but if you get like a really smart 12-year-old and you get him thinking about this kind of stuff, then it's all worth it.
Yeah.
I like this is a show for mass audiences, but there's just enough fascination that someone could easily be inspired and almost like a Newton apple falling on your head kind of thing happen.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. I think I'm gonna go this far. I think, and this probably I just thought this probably exemplifies what I love about this show. This show is, I mean, yeah, yes, it works on both levels. We always talk about that you can be an adult and still enjoy this show, but it was intended for kids primarily. I think
Right.
that I would go as far as to say that this show handles kids the way I always think parents should handle their kids, which is they make things that are that are intended for their kids, and they understand the difference between kids and adults, but they treat their kids like they're adults. They talk to them like they're adults. This is a show that is treating the kids like they're adults, not with like gratuitous violence and stuff like adults like, but like treating them like people, saying, no, you can understand this. We
Yeah,
don't have to
they're
dumb
they're
it down
making
for
sure
you. You
they're
can
always
understand
talking
this.
above the kids' level.
Hmm.
They want to make sure that if you don't understand what something means, watch it again, figure it out. Don't be complacent in it.
Yeah. We don't have to treat you like you're stupid.
Yeah,
We don't have to
exactly.
explain everything to you.
Yeah, the natural quest for knowledge. They released a lot of these episodes as just like 2 episode VHSs because they did
Yeah.
everything that way back then. But I remember I went out and specifically bought this VHS because I didn't get the episode the first time. I kept wanting to figure it out.
Oh, that's cool.
Uh,
Really?
yeah.
That's cool.
I don't know. I was like 3 or something when I first started watching Batman stuff. But this is the one that left a mark.
Mark.
um, this is the part where we get like a little bit more action. And we're kind of getting that to come to a head. But even this action is about to be mitigated by some intense drama when Batman's about to throw the coins in the air. And Two-Face's reaction, that scream he does, is just great.
Yeah, like you said, this voice actor is amazing.
Yeah. He could play Batman, I think, in some.
Yeah.
Yeah, this moment right here, this is perfect. They don't go into detail about why this coin particularly. It's not like the Dark Knight thing, like it's my dad's
No,
lucky
they
coin.
don't. Yeah.
And I don't mind that. I think there's a good Dick Tracy era of mystery kind of thing that you don't have to answer everything to it. We've got his psychology, we've got his motives. We don't need to know necessarily why this coin particularly, because it makes us ask more deep questions about who he is as a person.
That's true. Although I think it's simpler than that, Steve. I think if you're really looking at it, I would buy just simply it's a two-headed coin. It's got a scar on one side. He's just like that coin.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I don't know that you need any more than that, really. There might not be any significance to that coin except that he found it and liked what it represented about himself and built a psychological connection to it. It might have been nice if we'd seen that, but I don't know that you have to have it.
Yeah, like the coin would be arbitrary if it didn't have that mark on it. And that I guess that's
Yeah,
kind of fixed in that final scene we just saw with Batman tossing his coin in the pool of them, and it lands good heads up. It's just one in a million coin flips.
yeah.
Um,
Well, it's hard to watch an episode like this and not want to just watch it.
yeah, it's hard to talk over it. There's just so much to enjoy, so much to discuss, but the atmosphere, you just kind of want to get sucked in all over again.
And it is really interesting where this falls in the production order. Watching this, in the order that they made them, because you're right. The tone is very different now.
Yeah.
It suddenly got a lot more nuanced, and a lot less cartoony. And certainly there were episodes that I loved before this. Christmas with the Joker is one of my very, very favorites. I mean, I just love that. And there are a lot of really interesting things that you can glean from it. But it's a cartoon. That's dramatic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Suddenly the kind of story that they're telling is different. They got away from Fleischer there.
Yeah.
I mean, they got away from that kind of storytelling. That is, as I said earlier, that is a dialogue-driven episode, and how appropriate it being a psychological thriller, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. I think we can full on just go and say that. Like, it's not just an animated episode. It's not just a superhero cartoon. It's a psychological thriller. It works on that level. It's like Winter Soldier in that way. And it doesn't need to be live action to justify its own existence. It's dramatic in its own right.
Yeah, and it justifies doing it in that mode for a lot of the reasons that we said earlier. Visually, there's a lot of things that you couldn't as easily get away with stylistically unless, like, if you adapted this to live action, it would be just as different if you were to adapt a comic book to this.
Yeah, and I mean, the episodes like this make me really wonder what DC's animated video line is up to. Because they keep trying to force in a lot of violence and action in PG-13. This is a show for like 7-year-olds. And it's deeper than half of those movies.
Yeah, and feels realer.
Yeah, it's not,
Certainly.
they're not forcing anything to make it adult. It's just adult subject matter.
Well, everybody, thanks as always for watching. We sure appreciate it. What do we have next time? It's Never Too Late. I don't remember that one right off just by episode title.
That one's a good one. If you don't remember it, I don't want to spoil it because it's actually a legitimately fun episode to watch too.
Who's the villain?
I believe it's still Rupert Thorne.
Oh,
Or at
okay,
least it's a
okay.
mobster. It's an episode about a mobster, so.
Oh, that's okay. I think maybe I know what it is now. Okay,
Okay.
anyway, so that's what we'll be talking about next week. Thanks as always for watching. Sorry this came out a little bit late this week. We had some technical difficulties a couple days ago, but I wanted to make sure and get Two-Face out for you this week because we were just kind of chomping at the bit to talk about it. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed our show. We certainly did, and we will see you again next week. Join us Sunday night at 8 p.m. Central for Primetime Crisis Live. If you've been watching current TV shows based on comics and superheroes, and we're talking about everything this week except for Carter, Steve. It's
Yes.
it's going to be a big week. So be there for that if you can. And otherwise, thanks again for watching. We sure appreciate it. I am Captain Logan.
I'm Steve Baxi.
And we'll see you next time.